Hi, welcome back to my channel, Beautiful Minutia. If you're new here, my name is Tiffany, and today I am doing the first 5-star prediction video for 2025. So I did these quarterly last year. I've actually been doing that for the last couple of years, and that has worked really well for me. I initially tried doing annual 5-star predictions, and then I just was not getting to the books. So I found that if I'm looking at what some of my future reading plans are for the quarter, I can pick a couple of books that I'm like, oh yeah, I think I'm gonna love that. I did want to kind of wrap up some of my 5-star predictions that I had for the last quarter because I didn't really review those at all. And I had 3 books that I had chosen for the last quarter that I thought were going to be 5 stars. The first one of those was my most anticipated book of the year, because in 2023, my favorite fictional book was Agnes Grey. So I was planning to read The Tenant of Wildfell Hall by the same author, Anne Bronte, and had really hoped that this was going to be a 5-star read. I did do a whole reading vlog for that book, and so I'll link that in case you want to check that out and see what my in-depth thoughts were. But it didn't quite end up being 5 stars for me. I found myself not quite as attached to the characters as I was in Agnes Grey. It's just a very different reading experience because Agnes Grey is a much more slower and a much more quiet book. But Tenant of Wildfell Hall, I think, is a really important book as it's dealing with, a lot of the topics of the day in terms of women's rights and all of those kinds of things. So there's a lot of things in it that are really good. I think it's so well written. It was very compelling and it made me more angry than any book I had read in a really long time. I just absolutely despised one of the characters that I was supposed to despise. But I found elements of it to be a little bit lackluster, in particular the ending. So that prevented it from being a 5 stars for me, whereas I was hook, line, and sinker, rooting for the characters in Agnes Grey. I didn't quite have that same level of love for the romance and the other things that were happening in The Tenant of Wildfell Hall. That just felt kind of subpar for me, unfortunately. So it was a 4-star read and a very high 4-star. I enjoyed it a whole bunch, really loved it. So glad that I read it, but didn't quite make that 5-star level. I was also very highly anticipating The Shepherd's Life by James Rebanks. This is a nonfiction. It's a memoir about a shepherd living in the Lakes District in England and his experience growing up and then taking over the farm. And there was just some things I was so excited to read it because it was one of my friends' favorite books of the year the previous year, and it got chosen for our in-person book club. And I was really excited and I loved so much about it. I kind of had this hope that it would feel like James Herriot, and it wasn't quite that cozy, but a lot of the nature writing, and there was so much beauty in it that really just illustrated what it was like to live there. And so there were so many things about it that I loved, but I felt it was really poorly edited in that we follow essentially almost a year in a way, because we follow different seasons. So, I think we start with summer and then fall, winter, and end with spring. But he's flashing back and forth constantly between here's what happened when I was 4, here's what happened when I was in school, and then he ends up being able to go to Oxford, and so he'll do his college life, the years of him being married, what it's like on the farm right now, all within the same season. And he bounces back and forth so quickly and will shift sometimes even in one narrative, one story will shift from past tense to present tense. And I found that to be really jarring. And I felt like if it had been edited more tightly, I would have enjoyed it a lot more. But that was something that really prevented me from having a full experience of loving it. I think that if he had followed a more linear pattern of his memoir, I would have liked it more. Because once we got to the end, he had already told most of his backstory. So he still would have some things, most of the spring section was about lambing. And so he would talk about helping his father and grandfather lamb, and now his children are with him and they're experiencing lambing and being able to assist him and all of those kinds of things. But that all felt like it went together in a much more fluid way than the previous seasons did. The last book that I had hoped would be 5 stars because I'd heard so many people love it and rave about the writing is Kristin Lavransdatter by Sigrid Undset. If you've seen my favorites of the year, you know that this was indeed 5 stars. It's one of the last books that I finished in December. December because I read it over the course of October, November, and December with Dia. And it was just such a wonderful reading experience. It's a very sad book. There's a lot of melancholy to it, a lot of regret, a lot of consequences of decisions made, whether those are good consequences or bad consequences. You'll have to read and see for yourself because it's definitely a mixed bag. Some of it's good, some of it's bad. But it was just so well written. It's so poignant, so deep. The writing itself was beautiful and immersive and just like lovely. I enjoyed so much about it. So it actually made it into my top 3 of the year. So I was very, very, very happy that one of these books was indeed 5 stars, although I did enjoy all 3 of them. Okay, now let's make some predictions for the next quarter. This section will obviously be shorter because I don't have any thoughts on these books to share yet. The first book that I hope will be 5 stars is from an author that I have really loved and has become a new favorite author, and that's Willa Cather. In February, I'm going to be reading Death Comes for the Archbishop, and I really, really hope it will be 5 stars. I was a little hesitant to put this on here because even though I love Willa Cather's writing and have enjoyed everything I've read by her, not everything has quite hit the 5-star mark, and I think that this one takes place in New Mexico rather than the prairies. And so, though there's a short story of hers that I read that also took place in New Mexico, and it's one of my least favorite things I've read by her, so I'm maybe putting a book on here that maybe won't be 5 stars because her prairie works have been my favorite ones so far. But I really do just love her writing, so I hope that I will love this. I'm also planning to read in February The Italian by Anne Radcliffe. And a couple of years ago, 2022, I think, I read The Mysteries of Udolpho, and that was one of my favorite books of the year. It was like my number 2 book. So I have not yet read anything else by Anne Radcliffe, so I'm really hoping this will be 5 stars. I don't know. I think it's shorter than The Mysteries of Udolpho, but one of my favorite things about Udolpho was like that it had such a slow beginning, which I think is off-putting to a lot of people because it's supposed to be quite sensational and romantic and sweeping and like all these things and like so dramatic, and it's not very much in the beginning because there's a lot of traveling that takes place. But I loved the beauty of the writing in the travel section, so I have hopes that The Italian will maybe also have some beautiful descriptions of the countryside in Italy, or I don't know where exactly it takes place. I would guess Italy because it's called The Italian, but I could be wrong. But there was traveling through France and Italy in The Mysteries of Udolpho, so really hope I love The Italian just as much. And lastly, I am becoming a really big George Eliot fangirly, and my favorite book of the year last year was Daniel Deronda, and I'm planning to read Adam Bede this year. I really hope that this is 5 stars. I really do. I think I'm gonna really love it, honestly, because I have some friends that this is their favorite Eliot, so I have really, really high hopes for it. Much like The Italian, I know absolutely nothing at all about this book. I have read no plot summary or blurb or anything like that. I tend to be very cautious about that when I am looking into classics, particularly books that are Victorian or older, because a lot of times the little blurb will give spoilers, and I just don't want that. So I don't know anything about it other than I assume it's about a man named Adam Bede, and I'll keep you updated. Hopefully I love it. Well, those are some books that I hope will be 5 stars, as well as reviewing whether or not my 5-star predictions came true for the last one that I made. I'd love to hear from you in the comments down below. If you have read any of the books that I've read or that I'm planning to read, I would love to hear your thoughts, of course. And if you have any books coming up on the horizon that you really have high hopes for, that you hope that you'll absolutely love, I hope you'll share those with me as well. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, please hit like and also subscribe so you can continue to see more bookish content from me, and I will see you again next time.